Hey everybody, Sean with Good Dog, and we've got a little prong collar video tutorial for you guys, a prong collar introduction. So we did one a million years ago, and it's time for an update, frankly. So what I want to do is show you the prong collars that we recommend as far as the brand, the maker, also which sizes we recommend for which size dogs, and then also how to fit them appropriately for your dog. So let's jump into the video and see what we get. Okay gang, so the prong collar that we recommend and that we use for all the dogs here with our clients and actually our personal dogs as well is the Herm Springer prong collar. So I think you can get those off of Amazon, you can get them off of a ton of different internet sites. They're pretty readily available. What I don't recommend is getting some kind of generic prong collar from like a big box store. Those prong collars tend to have less effective action as far as the way they actually move and constrict, and a lot of the actual prongs are a sharper kind of a sharper finish, so they're rougher on the dog. So the Herm Springers have a really nice action, and they're also nicely rounded, so they're easy on the dog. Okay gang, so we've got the Herm Springer 2.25. It's even got its little sticker on here, or its little card, so you can see that it's an official one. This is what you should be getting if you order one. If it doesn't have this, maybe you've been duped. So this is the 2.25. So you can see it's fairly small gauge, fairly small prongs, right? It's got a little pressure plate in the middle, which allows the prongs to go opposite direction. All good stuff as far as design-wise. So for the 2.25, we recommend these for small to about, and small meaning like, say 10, 15 pound dogs up to about 30, 35 pound dogs. Now there's some flexibility in that, but that's roughly kind of the ballpark. And there's a reason for that. So these being this kind of thinner gauge, if you put these on a bigger, heavier dog, what we've found is that the corrections or the communication with the collar when you go to give it a pop, you don't get a full transference of the energy from the pop to the dog, because a lot of it is dissipated through the lighter gauge of the prong, and the bigger dog kind of absorbs it. So it gives is what I'm trying to say. And even though it might not seem like it gives, there is some give in this, and it just doesn't work as well in our experience. So if you've got a small dog, then small to medium I should say, then the Herm Springer 2.25 is really the way to go. The only thing I would add to that is that if you have a teeny tiny one, then you also have a micro collar available. We don't have one of those on hand, I don't think, but a micro collar is even tinier than this, and it's for like your 3 pound Chihuahuas, you know, your really tiny ones. So those would be the exceptions. But for most dogs, even really small ones, the 2.25 will do just fine. Now, let me also add, dogs that go home from our program, they're all e-collar trained. So for the walk, they're on a prong collar and they're on an e-collar. All the dogs that do walk programs with us, which are all the dogs, they all have 2.25s when they go home. So we may use a 3.0 for some of the training, some of the interior training, maybe even some of the initial walk if we feel like we need some better prong action with the dog. But the reality is when it comes to the kind of end state of training, then it's the 2.25. It takes up less real estate, as you can see, right, on the dog's neck because it's so thin. So if you've got an e-collar, then you've got, actually I should say, if you've got a prong collar, then an e-collar, then a flat collar, then this doesn't take up as much room on the dog's neck. So that's why we send the dogs home on this, along with the fact that at that point the dog is fully e-collar trained, and this is really just a backup. So this isn't doing any of the primary training or corrections or anything like that. It's just if your dog sees a cat or another dog, or there's, you know, a full meltdown or anything like that, the dog gets startled by like a car backfiring or something, you always have control of your dog. So that's what we use the 2.25 for. If I was just going to train a dog with no e-collar stuff, then the 2.25 would be the collar that I'd use for small to medium dogs, and I would use it for all of the training, and I would use it for the walk as well. So, but we even use it for our bigger guys once they're fully trained. So that's the 2.25. Hope that makes sense. Okay, gang, so here we have the 3.0, right? 3.0 Herm Springer. That's what it looks like. And I'll even, just to give you guys a little bit of a comparison so you have a real sense of the gauge difference, you can kind of see right here how different they are, right? Considerable difference. Okay, so the 3.0, as you can see, because of the thicker gauge, when you go to give a correction with this, especially early on in training, if you're doing more prong collar work, this is going to transfer more of the pressure that you're trying to share with your dog directly to your dog without it being dissipated by the thinner gauge of the prongs. So what we found is that, like I said, 30, 35 pound dogs and up, we really don't use anything bigger than this. This collar works really well at transferring the energy from a correction in a way where it doesn't dissipate what you're trying to share with the dog. So anyways, that's the 3.0. And what we'll use is, or what we'll do with this is we'll use this for the initial training for the interior work for a bigger dog. You might say, well, why not use a 2.25? Because of what I was just saying, because then you have to use more pressure because, and here's a weird thing, a lot of folks think that, well, the 2.25 has more prongs per square inch, so that's going to cause the prong collar to be more effective. But that's not necessarily the case. What we find oftentimes is that the 2.25, even with more prongs, is less effective, less impactful, and you have to use more pressure. So this is what we choose to use for bigger dogs. And so we will use this for all of the interior work, sit down, place, early recall, things like that. But once we start going to exterior work, as far as like doing e-collar heel, then this will likely get transferred out at some point. Maybe not straight away, because maybe the dog's a live wire and we want to have more control. We want to be able to give the dog a correction with a 3.0 that's more meaningful. So we want to still reserve that option if we need it. So the 3.0 might stay in play for a little while, but once the dog's really in a good space with e-collar training, then we're going to transfer this out and bring the 2.25 back in. So that's basically the overview or rundown of why we choose what we choose. And a lot of trainers have different opinions on this. And ultimately, it's up to you. If you're working with a trainer, it's up to you and your trainer to figure out what you really feel works best. I'm just sharing what I've seen work best with a very open mind. And what I mean by that is that I didn't come into it like, well, I was told the 3.0 is better and the 2.25 is like, no, I tried a bunch of different things, and what I saw was this is having limitations with bigger dogs. This is working better for bigger dogs. So that's where our decision-making process came from, always practicality. So once again, up to you and your dog, and if you're working with the trainer, up to you and your trainer to make a decision on what's the best prong color for you and your dog. Now, let's get one of these on a dog and see how the fit should be. Okay, gang, so we're now going to fit our 2.25 Herm Springer prong collar on Miss Billy B. She fits the criteria. What does she weigh?
32, 35.
Perfect. She's right in that spot of the small to medium dog that would be a good fit for a 2.25. A 3.0 would be too big. You wouldn't be able to get very many prong lengths on her, and it probably just wouldn't be a good fit physiologically for her. So I'm going to take this off. Billy B. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up. So everybody's got their own technique. I'm going to show you my technique. Squeeze, open. Now we're going to put this around her neck and see how it fits. Most likely it's going to be too big. Actually, it's really good. Hi. So that's actually a pretty darn good fit, like right out of the box. And my concern is that most of you won't be so lucky as to have that be the correct fit. So let's open it up. I'm gonna see if I can take one out and just make it a little more snug. There you go. And if you make it really snug, then it'll stay right at the top of the neck. So yeah, so we could actually do that where it sits right there. So that's one link out. And in a perfect world, you want the prong to sit right up here behind the ears, right up top like this, so you don't have to use a lot of pressure. And then if you're doing e-collar work, your e-collar would be right here. And then you've got your flat buckle here, and then you should have some kind of backup connective device, whether it's one of our fancy leashes that has a built-in backup, one of your own fancy style leashes with a built-in backup, or a carabiner or dominant dog collar, something like that, to where in case the prong collar fails, pops off, you still have your dog. So, but this is really what you want if you're looking for a good fit. So I'm gonna take this off. I'm going to put the other link in. But just so everybody knows, guys, these don't come sized for your dog, right? So you get a certain gauge and you get a certain amount of links, and you may need to purchase more links if you have a dog that's got a slightly bigger neck, slightly larger diameter neck than Billy. You might need a couple links more. Or if you have a dog with a smaller diameter neck, then you might need to take out 1, 2, 3 prongs, something like that. So let's see if we can get her up. Bill, right here. There you go. Okay, so once again, top of the neck. And then what I do, just let me do that one more time so you guys can see. And everybody can do this differently. If you have a really, really long furred, like a border collie or something like that, the way I'm doing it is I'm doing it upside down so I don't pinch her ears, and then I'm spinning it like this, right? So if you've got a dog that you can't spin it with because the dog's got just too much fur, then you have to start from the back and then come up under the neck and then clip it like that. But you have to be careful you don't pinch the skin, pinch the neck or anything like that. So I like to do it this way and then be able to spin it. But as you can see, it's a decent fit, but if she's running around, all of a sudden, you know, you thought you had a great fit on your prong collar, and look, now we're way down here by the flat collar. And if you had an e-collar on, it would be sitting on top of that, right? So that's what tells us that that's not a good fit. And for a lot of folks are really nervous about the prong collar being too snug. And I think just because they look at it, the visual is such that they see it and they think it's going to be painful for the dog. You can see she's in no distress, but they think it's going to be painful for the dog. So what they're trying to do is go for a looser fit. And then what that ends up doing is causes the prong collar to fall down lower on the neck, less sensitive part of the neck. They have to use more pressure. If they're trying to do a correction or use any kind of pressure to guide the dog or teach the dog, everything has to be, all the pressure has to be enhanced or escalated in order to be effective. Or you take this out, you do it right. Go like this. And then I'm going to spin it. Boom. There's the little link at the end. And now, if you look, I'm going to pull her fur out from under it. That's about as good of a prong collar fit. You're very cute. About as good of a prong collar fit as you could really hope to get. It's right there. And what that means is that, and I'll even like clip the leash onto it. What it means is that you're going to have to use very, very, very light pressure in order to communicate with your dog. If you want your dog to go this direction, that direction, teach them sit, teach them down, teach them place, teach them anything, it's going to be very, very light pressure. The lower it gets on the neck, the sloppier it gets, the more pressure you're going to have to use for your dog to actually notice it and care about it and prioritize it. So this is a really, really good fit. And like I said, a lot of folks will look at that and go, whoa, that's really high and that looks uncomfortable. And they'll put their hands in here and they'll be like, oh, that feels too snug. Your dog will be just fine. So that's a perfect fit for a 2.25 on a little to medium size dog. So now let's get out another guy, the big guy, and let's try out a 3.0. All right, so this is now clipped to the D-ring. You'll notice the D-ring actually swivels like this, even though it looks like it's twisting. The D-ring actually swivels. What you don't want to do is hook it to the dead ring. This ring doesn't move at all without tangling your chain. So make sure, and I'll take this off so you guys can see. Make sure you see the difference, and this has even got its little plastic thingy on there, but see, we call it a D-ring because it's actually shaped like a D. The dead ring is shaped like a perfect circle. So clip to here, not to here. Okay gang, so now we've got our 3.0, and we're going to try it on a bigger dog, which is the infamous Manolo. So we're going to take this label off. And if any of you guys want like a little secret tip, if you ever get confused about the D-ring versus the dead ring, they come with a little plastic zip tie on the D-ring. So if you leave it on there, you always know exactly which one is the right ring to put your leash on. Just a little helpful tip if you want to just leave it on there. Okay, so let's take a look and see how it comes straight out of the box for Manny as far as how it fits. Okay, so spun it around. Now, what you can see is if you look down here, you can see it's super loose, right? So straight out of the box, it's just a bad fit for Manny. Now, what will end up happening is this will just slide down and slide down and slide down until you got this Mr. T super loose action, and that is not going to work for what you want. So let me size it for him and see if we can't get something that works nice. So Henri, you want to hold him so he doesn't go anywhere? Okay, so I'll show you guys how I'm going to do this. So my guess is I'm going to take out two. I'm going to take out one on each side. So I took out one here. Now I'm going to flip it, take out one here. There we go. Now I'm going to start again. Oh, I have to say I'm a master. And then, boom, we spin it. Then we take the fur, just like we did with Billy, except Manny doesn't have quite as much fur. And now we've got a really nice fit right under the chin, right behind the ears, just like we did with Billy, right? Which means, once again, we don't have to use very much pressure in order to communicate with our dog and have them be, connected to us and being able to use just delicate pressure to be able to communicate in an effective fashion. So that's the 3.0 on Manny, and this is your D-ring, this is your dead ring, and that's how you should, if you're looking for an optimum fit, that's what you should be shooting for. Now, I know a lot of folks, I'm going to do this one more time for you guys. Can you hold on to him? I'm going to do this one more time for you guys because I know a lot of folks, they get hung up on feeling like the prong collar is too snug. And I'm telling you, you make life for your dog and for yourself much harder. So this is back to how it was. And then once this starts to get sloppy, you're going to be having to use a ton of pressure to get your dog to even notice that you're there. So the goal isn't to have to manhandle your dog. The goal is to be able to just use nice, easy, soft pressure to where your dog actually listens to what's going on just from soft stuff. And it doesn't mean that you can't use a firmer prong pop if you need to, but you'll get much more bang for your buck if the collar's fitted properly. So do that one more time. Hold that guy. Take out a link off each side. Boom. Spin it. And there we go. Look at you. You look so good. That is a proper fitted prong, right? I can get my fingers under here, but it's a snug fit. So it's not going to move on its own. In a perfect world, your prong collar will stay just like that. Now, that said, not all of you, not all of you are going to have a perfect fit with your dog's neck and the prong collar. It's just the way it goes. I have a lot of folks that message me and they're like, well, my dog's in between and the prong, is either too tight or it slides down. The reality is they don't make a half link that you can really, really customize this. And so sometimes you have to make do with the best you can. So if it was down to me or up to me, I would go for a slightly snugger fit rather than a slightly looser fit because it's not going to bother your dog. So that's a nice 3.0 fit. Do we want to put a leash on here and see what that looks like? Okay, hold that tighter. So we're going to use actually Manny's leash, which is one of ours that has the backup built into it. I'm going to demo just a couple of safety precautions of why we use this, why we designed it like this. So for one, we have our carabiner on here and it's locking. So we put that through the D-ring and then lock it. That way this can't slip off. And to be honest, prong collars are notorious for popping out of the leash clips, especially the 2.25s are notorious for popping out of leash clips. Then the other problem is that these can pop off. Your dog rolls on the ground, rubs up against a tree, or you just didn't put it on perfectly. And next thing you know, this pops off. And if it does, you don't have a hold of your dog. So we came up with this design, which then connects to their flat collar. And if you were using an e-collar, then the e-collar would go in between here. E-collar sandwich, right? Prong collar, e-collar, flat buckle. Of course, he's got a giant flat buckle, but this is how it would look, right? So then I could give him a correction with this, or I could give him information, or I can give him guidance with this, but this doesn't actually interfere with that guidance. And if this prong collar is to pop off, boom, worst case scenario, oh my God, we still have our dog. Right? Yes, we still have our dog. So that's the concept behind that. What I'm going to show you is, if you don't want to get one of these leashes, because you certainly don't have to, is I'm going to show you another trick that's less expensive. Sorry, Manny, if I pull your neck off. Okay. So let's go back to the other leash. Henri, can you hold on to this guy? Oops. Okay, so this would be our regular leash, which once again has the carabiner, because I'm telling you guys, if you're not going to use a specialized leash with a specialized locking carabiner like this, you have to use another carabiner that comes like this that you can lock onto here if you want to be extra safe, because it just happens way too often. So what we've done is created this with the locking carabiner, goes through the dead ring. Now, if that's all you want, you don't want to deal with the other part of the leash thing, or if you have a leash that you really like, or you have one of those kind of like round ropey leashes with a carabiner at the end, then what you can do is you come over to your dead ring. I don't know if you can see this, Marta. Can you see where the dead ring is? Right, so here's the live ring, the D ring, spins. Here's the dead ring. Carabiner goes through it, then goes over to here. Boom. You basically have the same safety backup. Sorry, you have the same safety backup, but just with the carabiner. Now, the only issue with this, different than the leash that I showed you prior, is that the carabiner can tug, because if it's pulling at the collars, if the flat buckle's loose, like a lot of dogs' flat buckle collars are, then it can start to pull down on this. And over time, even, you know, he's got a really snug fit, but if your dog doesn't have a perfectly snug fit, it'll probably start to pull that prong collar down a little bit. So that's the only downside of it, but you can always adjust it back up. The difference is this is only going to cost you 35 cents if you want to really keep it super inexpensive. So that is the prong collar tutorial. That's the 2.25 Hermspringer. That's the 3.0 Hermspringer. Once again, small to medium dogs for the 2.25, 3.0 for the medium to large dogs. We don't use anything bigger than this, even if we're tackling rhinos. And then for the really, really teeny tiny ones, we've got the micros, but we rarely use them. I mean, you're talking like what, like 3 pound, 3.5, 5 pound Chihuahuas, something like that. Really tiny, tiny little dogs. But if you do have one of those, then the micros can come in handy for that. Once again, the micro should also fit snug, because here's the deal. The micro being such a thin gauge width-wise, let me show you real quick. It's so thin this way that what ends up happening is that it flips over very easily. It'll invert. And so what you have to do is you have to make sure it's super snug, even on your little dog. So you can't say, well, he's just a little dog, he doesn't need it to be, you know, snug. Absolutely. If you're using a micro collar on a small dog, you absolutely need it to be snug so it doesn't flip and so the collar works appropriately. So that is our prong collar tutorial, updated from 35 years ago. And Manny, you made it through like a champ. So hopefully that's helpful, you guys. Any questions, as always, you know, you can always hit us up. Facebook, Instagram, DMs, PMs, whatever, what have you. And we'll do our very best to try and help steer you guys in the right direction. All right? Hope this helps.